Welcome, Todd. I wanted to start. You've watched Hindu monks eat human remains, embedded with Iraqi snipers, and climbed Mount Everest alone. Do you think that hankering for the extreme is hereditary? Were there signs of it growing up in Sydney? And just to be clear to our listeners, we're talking about Sydney, Nova Scotia, Canada, not Sydney, Australia. What was life like in Canada?
Well, Sydney, from Sydney to Sydney, that is the arc of my life.
It's crazy.
So I would say that my adventure or my spirit for adventure is based on two things, two sides of a coin. One is an inbuilt insecurity, and the other one is a natural curiosity. I grew up in a small town called Sydney in Canada. My parents never had any formal education. My dad worked on the factory floor of Coca-Cola, and my mom at KFC. And my mom was an addict. So I grew up suicidal addict, actually, in the end. And that's how I grew up. I grew up with a loving mother that was only able to give so much to me. And some would call that trauma. I guess in some ways that is trauma. But it's trauma that sort of sparked this desire to, one, as my mother used to say, make something of myself, and to explore, to get out, to get as far away as I could get from that life. And I went from Sydney to Sydney. I mean, there's been plenty of stops in between, but I went from Sydney to Sydney.
Yeah.
And so, yes, I would say that my sort of sense of adventure and curiosity and insecurity and all of those things come from a childhood.
So insecurity is one of these things that drove you up Mount Everest. Interesting.
Yes.
Why climb Mount Everest?
Well, in fairness, I've been a climber since I was 8 years old, maybe even earlier than that. I used to climb rock faces across from my house in Canada, and there was something about the escape of climbing. And I always climbed not to get to the top, but to get away from the bottom. And I loved climbing so much. And so I moved on from rock climbing to mountaineering. And mountaineering is an exercise in torture. So it is somewhat of a degrading activity because you suffer almost the entire time. So there's not many moments in high altitude mountaineering where you're going, yeah, this is so good, I'm so happy to be here. No, you are either facing death or danger, or extreme cold, or highly risky environments, and you're doing it when have been grounded down, whittled down to your weakest point. And for me, there's something incredibly attractive about that. And so I've been climbing most of my life. And Everest was something that was on my list. And this was all before I'd done anything on television. Everest was something on my list and something that I've always wanted to do and test myself more from the symbolic. It's not the hardest mountain, but from a symbolic perspective, it is interesting because it is the highest. And so I wanted to try myself out on that.
How did you feel at the top?
When I got to the top, I fell to my knees. I distinctly remember I fell to my knees and I was just saying out loud to someone, thank you. Now, I'm a secular person, so I have no idea who I was talking to. And then my second thought was, get out of here. Because most people die on the way down, not on the way up. So I'd spent I don't know how many years, dozens of years, anticipating that moment, and all I really wanted to do once I got there was get down.
Interesting. And on the dangers of Everest, I love this story about you looking up Edmund Hillary, who was the first man to reach the summit alongside Sherpa Tenzing Norgay. You found him in the New Zealand White Pages and rang him. What did he tell you about fear and the mountain?
Yeah, so that I was not on television. He didn't know me at all. I was in New Zealand on business. I was working in advertising. I was down there for the Australian Tourist Commission, and I got dropped off by a cab driver in Auckland. And the cab driver's son was a climber in Whistler, and we talked about climbing. And then I told him I was a climber and all of that. And when we arrived at the hotel, he just, out of nowhere, just said, you know Edmund Hillary lives here, right? And I said, yeah, I know he's a Kiwi. I said, does he live close by? He goes, yeah, you should give him a call. So I went up, and sure enough, Sir Edmund Hillary is in bold in the White Pages. So if you didn't know anything about New Zealanders, you do now. So I phoned him, and his wife answered, and I said, I was nervous, and I said, my name is Todd Sampson. I'm about to go climb Mount Everest in 2 weeks. Is it possible? Could I have a word with Sir Ed? And then I could hear her. yelling, holding the phone, yelling, Ed, there's a climber on the phone, wants to have a word. And then he just burst through the line. And I had dreamt about him since I was a kid, you know, and his story and his adventure. And then I went to see him, and it was incredible. It was incredible in that it was beautifully ordinary. So he stood when I came in, and he's 6'4". He's this massive man, and I sat down, and his wife put some tea out, and she slapped me on the back and said, "Enjoy yourself," and we had biscuits together.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. The best mentor you could ask for. You mentioned your former career in advertising there, and I just wanted to take you back to what I regard as possibly the best slippery dip of all time. I actually once snuck into the office of Leo Burnett Australia, where you were CEO for several years, and there is a giant spiral slide that goes through the office. Was this part of your daily routine, riding the slide?
You know, it's funny you mentioned that slide, because Leo Burnett was known for that slide. So you could slide 3 floors in our architecturally designed building. You could slide in a spiral slide. So if you had enough courage or alcohol or whatever you were doing at that time, you could whip down on a potato sack to the bottom floor. I wanted so badly to remove that slide.
No.
Yes. Because to me, it symbolized everything of the excess of the advertising in the 60s, 70s, 80s, some could argue the 90s. And I felt embarrassed about it. So clients would come in, and it was hard enough that we had this sort of stunning office that overlooked the Opera House. And so as soon as you walk in, what is your first thought? Your first thought is, holy shit, these guys must charge a lot of money. This is the first thought. And then on top of that, to make matters worse, you've got a slide in the middle, and you can hear people going, woo, down the slide. I mean, would you give these people money? Would you spend millions of dollars?
I didn't care. I just wanted my sack and to go down on the slide, Todd. I cannot believe that you were against the slide. You would have taken away one of my best childhood memories. So we'll just move past that. I'm very disappointed in that. But, well, speaking of the excesses of advertising, I did want to ask that, did you ever view the kind of dark art of marketing advertising as kind of the antithesis to science and the things you've come to scrutinise in your documentaries, especially when it comes to claims we see around health products, wellness trends, and their effect on body image?
I always felt advertising on some level was a Faustian pact that I made. I came from a family without money. And my whole life, I was just scared to be poor. I still, on some level, I still am. So I did everything with money as my north, my compass. And because of that, I made some horrible decisions. I've made some okay decisions in my life. Because I think in general, looking back, it's never great to be guided by money. But I was guided by the fear of not having it. And I remember the moment where I had got a scholarship. Without scholarships, I never would have been through. I wouldn't have got my first degree. I wouldn't have got my MBA. I wouldn't have got any of that because I couldn't afford it. But I remember my second scholarship, and I had the option whether I study science, which was my love, what I wanted to study, or business. And if you are a kid worried about money, an MBA is the golden light in the distance. And I ran for that. I just did not have the courage to study science. And it's strange that, yes, now I do all these programs. A lot of them have a science, or I try to showcase scientists. A lot of them have some sort of science backbone because I'm doing what I want, not what I need to do, or at least what I thought I needed to do. And so advertising was always that for me. I did it for money from the very, very beginning. And I fell in love with it. Having all these eclectic creative minds, I knew early on that I was somewhat of a creative, conniving kid, you could say, doing everything I can to scrape and not end up where I was. And advertising sort of celebrated creativity. It was one of the few, because poetry doesn't pay, right? It was one of the few industries where I could be creative and I could make money, a lot of money. And yeah, so I have always carried somewhat of a guilt in a way. And then, of course, Gruen comes along. And now, like a serial killer, I am dissecting my crimes on national television in front of millions of people.
And just to jump in for people who might know, obviously it's a very famous, popular show, but we're talking about the panel show for the ABC that analyzes advertising. Go on, Todd.
Yes. So I get a phone call one day from Andrew Denton's office, and that phone call goes something like this. You've been recommended by some people in the industry to think you'd be great on television. Are you interested in this TV show? And it's called Gruen or something like that. And I was like, maybe. And then they sent in John Casimir, who was one of the creative geniuses behind it, into my office. And he comes in, slide in the middle of my office.
Yep.
Beautiful view, out of which John, who is an incredible man, noticed none of it, just walked straight in. And he pitched the idea to me. And my first thought was, no way. No way. I'm not going to do a show taking the piss out of advertising while I'm running a huge, large advertising agency. Not going to happen. That's in my mind. And outwardly, I just said, I don't know. And then John left, and he went back to Andrew, and he said to Andrew, there's something in that guy. I don't know what it is. He didn't sell himself at all. It was strange. He said everyone else sold themselves, and he didn't. I think there's something there. Then Andrew calls me and says, would you mind doing a workshop? And I was like, if you don't want to be on the show, because I said, I don't think the show. He goes, well, why don't you just come and do a workshop with us? And I'm thinking, we do workshops for a living in advertising. It's our way of, like polishing up what clients already know and charging them money for it. So I get called into this workshop. I agree to go, and I'll never forget it. I was at the ABC. It was quiet. It was a Saturday. Andrew Denton comes up and puts his hand on my shoulder, and he said, Todd, the workshop's about to begin. Please come. I open up the door, and I remember having this sense of panic. I saw Will Anderson, who I didn't know at the time, sitting in the middle, and 3 other advertising people that I had not seen before, knew nothing about, and then 3 big black cameras facing a table. Sat down, and they said, rolling. And in my mind, I'm like, holy shit, rolling what? And then we talked about tampons for 40 minutes. And that's how it all began.
Well, with that Faustian sort of deal you're talking about, one is the money and the security. And are you saying the other one was sort of like squaring with sort of feeding into those things like the impact of advertising on body image, for example, which you came to scrutinise through a show like Mirror Mirror?
Yes. Yes. So it is take with one hand and give with another. Now, I don't want to spend a whole bunch of time knocking advertising, although we all know that at the heart of advertising, it's getting people to spend money that they often don't have on things they often don't need to impress people they often don't know. So the deal I made with myself when I agreed to do this show was I would be the same way on television as I am in the boardroom with my clients, which I'd like to think is just like forthright and honest about things. And so that's in my mind, that's what I did. So some people in the industry don't like that I've been so honest about everything and just saying it as I understand it and through my own lens and sort of, I guess people say showing the secrets or dissecting the secrets. But that was the pact, again, I made in my mind, is I will be as truthful and straight down and honest as I can. If I lose all my clients as a result of that, well, yeah. That didn't happen. But that's how I got around it in my mind.
Yeah.
So, and then there are not, it is important to, I know the point that you're making, it is one hand and the other hand, and that on one hand, we're showing models that are, too thin to be on television. And then on the other hand, I do an entire series, Mirror Mirror, dedicated to body image dissatisfaction. I always tried. So it's important to say that there are a lot of really good people in advertising, really good, smart, creative, family-based, caring, society-focused people in the advertising industry. There are lots of them. And all of us tried to do it as best we could within the confines and framework that we have. And if all the good people never went into advertising, well, that would be a big problem.
It would be worse.
Yeah, it'd be finance.
Yeah. Well, we'll move on to some of the shows that you made after your advertising career. You've said you've been a wellness addict at some points in your life. After trying some pretty unconventional stuff for TV, like letting leeches suck out your blood and then reapplying it as a gory facial, or you were just telling me before we started recording that you've been intentionally burned to study your pain response. What's your approach to health now? Have these shows affected your routine and what you do on a day-to-day basis?
It was strange doing the Mirror Mirror series on both the wellness industry and on body dysmorphia, because I think that, well, I'll speak for myself, a lot of those things I found in me. Like I was watching it going, yes, I am someone who has trained every other day for, since I was 18 years old. And so there's something in that, so some kind of dysmorphia within that. And I could see a lot of myself while I was making these films. So, and I think we're drawn to content. Like a lot of those films, they're my choices, right? It's what I want to do. And we're all drawn to it for our own reasons. But yes, so I'm willing and sometimes able to try just about anything in the name of science or in the name of entertainment, with science as a kind of veneer over the top of it. And I've learned a lot about myself and my body, my capabilities, and what I can do. And then that kind of culminated in a series about wellness with Mirror Mirror, which a lot of people in the wellness industry did not like, because it might have just been too confronting. And by the way, I felt bad about that series in some ways, because I've always tried to showcase scientists on the platform that I have. So I would go out and meet talent. It could be, getting kinesiology or whatever. And then I would do it and I would feel great when it happens to me. Like I would be lying there and I would say to camera, I feel really good, and the drums are on my head. And
Covered in leech blood.
Yeah, bleach blood. And she was fantastic, by the way. And the stones are on my, on my body.
Chakras
All
or
that
whatever.
I felt great. And then the scientist would come over the top in the edit and go, it's all bullshit.
Well, this is the thing, like with wellness, right? Like it all feels good in the moment, and then as soon as you apply a little bit of scrutiny, it all falls down. So I'm wondering, after deep diving into the wellness industry in a show like Mirror Mirror, do you just go back in your own life totally to basics, working out, eating veggies? Do you do anything woo-woo, spoonful of spirulina? What's the situation?
Well, you cannot underestimate the power of placebo. And that's one of the themes that came out of that series. And the scientists all pointed it out, that your brain is the chief. And if the chief thinks everything's going okay in the body, well, then guess what? Your body, you send the chemistry to okay. So there is a level of placebo going on for most of these things. And you cannot knock that completely. The charlatans can use placebo really, really well, because it's religion, right? If you strongly believe it, it has its impact. But yes, I can boil mine down to, if all the scientists I dealt with the Mirror Mirror series and Redesign My Brain over 8 years, and some of the cleverest minds, it really comes down to a few things. Try to get 8 hours sleep as best you can. Be in your bed for 8 hours. Cut out a third of the food. I learned that from one of the tribes that I embedded with in Africa. Cut out a third of the food. We don't need to eat as much as we eat in the West. And I am not recommending dieting, but intermittent fasting. Michael Mosley, bless his heart, he did a series on intermittent fasting. It's quite clever. It's not a diet. It's a good, clever way of living, I think. Walk 20 minutes, brisk walking 20 minutes a day. You don't need to do HIIT training or 20 minutes of brisk walking a day, and socialize. So that last one I'm very, very bad at, but socialize. And that is, if there was a formula that I learned, it's that. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, the basics. The social thing is really interesting, because there was a study recently that the New York Times reported on, ranking the different sports and which one was better for longevity. And tennis came out way on top, can extend lives by about a decade. And there's things there like balance and moving quickly and all the cognitive skill of, reacting fast to a volley. But what was really underappreciated yet unearthed by these scientists, that if you compare it to something like swimming, tennis is extremely social.
Yes.
You're meeting all these people, you're playing with at least another person, if not three, and that's one of the longevity boosting things associated with that sport, which I thought was so interesting.
I wish I had. I'm a natural introvert, or I guess you could say a confident introvert. My default is to be alone, even away from my own family. So like when I'm filming, I'm more relaxed, and I've cried more on camera, especially the Body Hack series. I've cried more on camera than I have with my own friends and relatives. But when the camera stops rolling, I'm often in my hotel room and my crew are out partying, whatever.
Interesting.
And I'm not. So I'm working on that. Also, being a non-drinker is like being a vegetarian among cannibals, especially in Australia. So that is a weird thing, because you don't, when you don't drink and you're out with people that are drinking all the time, and it's not that fun.
Yeah, I'm 2.5 months into my first sober year. Do you have any tips for me?
Yes, it's funny how don't surround yourself with people that are out. Don't put yourself in the environment of which you want to do it. And that's what I mean. You suddenly become antisocial. And, the fact that you're doing it and the fact that it's an effort is insightful in its own right.
It is, indeed. Although have you heard about this concept? It's called veganism with bacon. No. It's kind of a metaphor, which I really like when we're talking about health. It's like, how so often someone's talking about being vegan and another person will say, oh, I'd totally be vegan. I just cannot give up bacon. It's better to do it 80% rather than all the way through. Yes. So my drinking, I actually, confession alert, did drink this most recent weekend because I was away for a hens do. And yes, I got invited to the hens, not the bucks, which I was thrilled about. And I'm going to drink for that weekend and one more when I have a wedding, and the rest of the year is still sober, and I'm still going to count it as a sober year, because I'd rather do a year without drinking and just cheat on 2 weekends rather than flagellate myself. I just don't think I would do it without like a little out every now and again. Are you like that, or are you a bit more all or nothing?
Well, I'm all or nothing because of Mum. So one of Mum's drugs of choice was alcohol, and she was definitely a hardcore alcoholic. So there's a if only that was her only thing, but there's a part of me that's scared of alcohol. There's a part of me that thinks that there's some switch inside me that if I drink too much, that switch is going to go on and that's it for me. And I feel the same way with my kids, with my girls. I'm nervous and scared about it. And in a society where drinking is the norm by a lot and not drinking is ostracized often, that's quite nerve-wracking.
Did you just never pick up the bottle, or?
No, I drank. I've tried everything. I've and it's not like I went into AA. I've never had any issue that I know of. It's fear. So I'm just too scared to have an issue. So I'll hold a drink sometimes at an event or something, because it makes people feel comfortable, which in its own right is insightful and a little bit scary.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really interesting, because I was reading as well on social media. This was a few years ago, so your kids would have been a bit younger, but you would actually get on social media with them and scroll with them and see what they were looking at. You wanted to be in there, in the pit with them to understand it. Are you going to be able to do that with the drinking question? How are you going to handle that?
No, they're pretty good with me, because they know that I won't get upset about it. I'll just internally combust. So they can go to me for these things. And because look, I've done drugs on television, I've done hallucinogens on television, I've done marijuana, I've done lots of stuff on television. So my kids know that I've experimented with lots of things, so they can come to me for that. That's no problem. But that show you're referring to, so I did a Mirror Mirror series on the internet, the impact of the internet on kids, and there was the opening scene, which was the one everyone talked about with Omegle. That was for my kids.
And Omegle is the chat site where you just connected with a random person.
So we've got an 18-year-old, 19-year-old who posed as a 13-year-old online, and we filmed this whole thing with this company, and we got her. And the amount of, it was just pedophiles going at her the whole time, all recorded. And to the point where I jumped in front of the camera and said, "Hey, that's my daughter, and she's 13." She would say she's 13, and more people would come. Like, it was crazy. And that came from my kids. So my kids were mucking around on this Omegle site. And I said, "What is this?" And they said, "Have a look, Dad." And it was like, "Oh, that's horrible." And they were all doing it, all the kids at school. And it was all, and so I said, "All right, let's feature this." And so a lot of parents knew nothing about it. And now I'm not going to take credit for it, but if I can take 1 ounce of credit, I will. That site has been closed down. And shortly after the series went to air. So I learned a lot about the digital footprint and what they're doing from my own children. And
are you a supporter of the social media ban for under 16s?
Yes. Am I a supporter of its effectiveness? Yet to be seen. I think so. I don't want to sound overly draconian, and my kids will say, "Dad, you're not really like that anyway." The brain does not fully develop until the mid-20s. So we know that. And it's highly plastic leading up to the mid-20s. So where possible, if you can avoid things that seriously can alter your brain, CTE, alcohol, smoking, marijuana, social media, it's going to allow you the potential of a better brain. And so I believe if we can restrict, it's not about, kids are getting around that, no problem. They can get around anything you put to them online. But I think if we can use the ban as a tool that parents can talk to their kids about why and what's involved here, then it's a good thing. Then it's a good thing. So I think we should try and protect our brain, full stop. We should definitely protect it under the age of 25.
Yeah, interesting. You've just asked the question why there, which is a fantastic segue to your new show, Why, where you speak to a range of people who have wild beliefs or extreme behaviours. One of the episodes, which was just totally gripping, you actually go and visit a doomsday prepper community in America, right? Where there's this group of people who are preparing for the zombie apocalypse, quite literally, or some other societal collapse. And your wife is actually a prepper. Can you tell me about that and how that connection helped you with that episode?
So I arrived onto this. Again, the Why series is about jumping into the worlds of people that live at the extremes, worlds we often look away from, and just exploring their whys, why they do what they do. So we looked at a donor dad who has 200 children now. We looked at doomsday prepper family. We looked at an alien church, and we looked at base jumpers. So sort of almost fringes of society that we want to ignore, but they often have interesting whys for what they do. The doomsday prepper, when I arrived, we thought the female, it was a family, and we thought the mom was going to be the main hero. And when I arrived, the man wanted nothing to do with me. He just looked at me, sized me up, and said, "I don't want any of this yuppie shit. I don't want to be a part of it." And he's quite far right. But I had a card, which is not a trick, in that my wife is a prepper. She is a modern day prepper, so she's not a survivalist. She doesn't have like a knife in her mouth out in the backyard digging a hole. But she is someone who does think about cyber attacks and EMTs and all of these things. And so I kept reminding them that my wife is a prepper like them, because they were like that. And that loosened everything up. And I told them this story, true story. So I arrived home one day, this was prior to filming, and there were a number of life jackets on my table. And all the life jackets for my wife, for my two daughters, and my Doberman pincher, female, there was life jackets for all of them. And they had their names on them and mobile numbers and contact details. And there was none there for me. And I went, "Well, where's my life jacket?" And she said, "I'm not going to buy you a life jacket. Go buy your own life jacket and make sure that you don't buy one of those expensive ones. I got these from Aldi." And so
what emergency are we preparing for with the life jacket?
I think we live close by the water, so she's thinking tsunami, maybe.
Okay, makes sense.
And that I just have this image, right? They're all floating away, including my dog, who's dog paddling, and I'm like drowning because I'm the only one in the house who can't swim. So it's nice of her. Get life jackets for everyone else. So Naomi is a prepper in the modern sense of the world. And you could argue that if you have an umbrella, you're a prepper. And most of us have this, and I did going in, especially American preppers. I went into this going, "Oh, here we go. It's going to be just a comedy, a spoof." And by the end, when you listen to them and you understand that at the heart of almost all fringes in society or extreme groups or whatever, there is a human need. There's something underneath it all. Their why. And in that case, it's a sort of swirl of fear and control. The want to have control over the uncertain and the fear of what could go wrong. And we all carry that on some level.
And these people live on this property and they sort of interview other people who can come into the community and train with them and prepare. There's a really compelling quite extraordinary scene where this kind of motley crew of people from 17 to 70 are undertaking these military drills with loaded, gigantic guns. Am I right to say that wasn't the most comfortable place for you to be or thing to watch?
No, it was confronting. And what was confronting is that the people were sort of okay, and I got used to them, but this idea of loaded weapons everywhere at the ready. And in some ways now, considering what's happening in America, this episode is dystopian because you look at it and you go, oh, that's where you don't want things to go. The sort of normality of having loaded weapons and all kinds of high-powered weapons around you all the time. Like, we were doing these crazy drills, but for them, they were real. But for me, they were like, okay, well, this is never going to happen. The zombies are not coming. But what we think of zombies and what they think of zombies are two different things. So they're not scared of the event that's going to cause it. They're scared of the post-event when people are desperate and they're coming for supplies and so that's what they're prepping for. They're prepping to keep people out. The opposite of altruism. They, when what they call shit hits the fan, they're putting up barricades and wanting to kind of destroy people that come onto their property because they believe these people are going to loot them or take their supplies that they've stored. And so that episode, when I look at that now, it's saying a lot about where we're at in society right now, in Australia, in America, around the world.
Because there's always this thing where normies like me look at preppers and think it's really extreme and really wacky, but then there's just that kernel in the back of your mind just thinking, what if they're right?
Yeah.
Was there any sort of, obviously this kind of tendency to prep vastly differs between your wife with the life jackets and these Americans with their AK-47s. Is there a psychological through line that you think compels them to undertake this behavior?
Sense of control. I think that the majority are just trying to get meaning in a meaningless world and a sense of control in uncertainty. I think that and protection of family, which I can relate to. I wouldn't go that extreme, but this has all been amplified online. And so because we have this sort of polarized world now, and any view you have, you pick it. If you want to believe the table people that only believe in gray felt tables, they're online. I mean, they exist. You Google them, they exist. They have a belief system. I mean, everything exists out there. So people are finding their tribes, and we are becoming more and more polarized and more separate from each other in our bubbles. And that's the point of the series. I wanted to do a series that look at the UFO Church is one of my favorite episodes. They were gorgeous people, but they believe all the religious leaders are aliens and that there's a spaceship above us, that Jesus comes from Mars, and there's a spaceship above us, and they pray into a box, and that box takes their prayers. It goes up into the spaceship. The spaceship goes over to whichever part of the world that you wished for, and that those good wishes will come down on those people and help them. Now, part of me goes, whenever I tell people about the alien church, they go, oh, this is a bunch of nutters. But then, not everyone, but the majority of people are okay with a man born of a virgin who can walk on water and was resurrected from the dead. That's fine, but the idea that Buddha was an alien is way beyond conception.
It is insane on paper. I was going to ask how you go about, I guess, covering thought like that with a straight face almost.
Well, firstly, it's what you just said. There's a part of me that is worried that maybe they've got it worked out and I've got it wrong as a secular person. So, and I never go into these things looking down. I always go into them either looking sideways or slightly up. That I'm genuinely trying to figure it out. It is a true curiosity. Now, as we move along, like in Doomsday, there are some really funny things that happened that you just can't help but have a laugh about. But the majority of the time, I mean, I come from a background where a lot of these beliefs are born, and so.
What do you mean by that?
Well, far be it from me to judge, really. Like, I saw. Like in this, the guy who has the 200 kids, he's a super donor, a donor.
The Sperminator.
Sperminator, he's called by the New York Times. And a lot of people look at that, especially the opening scene. A lot of women that have seen it in the preview of it now, they just go disgusting, gross. And I must admit, I went there apprehensive about someone who has, and what are we showcasing here, and what are we exploring exactly? And then when you realize a number of things, that one, he doesn't do it for money. And you go, okay, well, that's interesting. And then you go, oh, wait now. And he only supplies sperm to people that can't afford IVF, which is super expensive in a broken Medicare system in America. And you go, oh, okay. Now it's, as you peel it back, the sort of, the not hate, but the dislike changes. And I think for almost anyone, once you understand their why, a lot of judgment falls away. Because at the heart of it, for most people, even the most extreme, there's some human need. There's some human need going on.
What you've just said really makes me think that with each of these extreme people that you speak to, it's almost like with each one, there's this reaction of like disgust or fear. Like with the base jumpers, you'd be like, oh, I would never do that. You've got this guy who's had 200 kids and you sort of feel really icky about that. But if you just get over that lip, that's where the really fascinating stuff is. Is that right?
That's right. And that's what the show's trying to do. Because you never can get to someone's why. Well, you can't get to it easily. And we're not pretending to be psychologists unpicking everyone's sort of disorders. But the base jumping one you raise is interesting, right? So we meet this guy, this Canadian base jumper, we're at a very famous base jumping bridge in America, where all the base jumpers go. It's the mecca of base jumping. And I meet this guy. He went there 20 years ago, and he's doing a jump. Canadian guy, he's doing a jump with 6 other people off this bridge. They're going to do 4 rotations, and then they're going to land. They're going to pull the chutes and land. He does 2 rotations and realizes he's not getting the next rotation. His leg is caught in the rope. He then, which we show this in the film, he then plunges without chute opening into the river. The story of him trying to keep his head above water when he realized that he was paralyzed is incredible to listen to. He gets rescued. He's a paraplegic. He then comes back 20 years later with us on the same bridge that he jumped, where he lost the use of his limbs, and he jumps again.
Wow.
In a wheelchair.
Wow.
And now people go, oh, why would anyone do that? Base jumping, it's crazy. It's silly. But what he says afterwards when he lands, and I'm in tears. I'm just like, I'm a mess. And he is explaining that when I'm flying through the air, it's the only time I'm not disabled. And he says, I deserve that. I want that. He said, my life is about compromises. I can't get in this door. I can't get up here. I can't go here. I'm disabled for this. I have the inability to do that. Well, when I'm flying through the air with my parachute above me, I'm me. Suddenly my view of base jumping changes.
That's extraordinary.
Yeah.
Who was the hardest to see eye to eye with?
I would say the big guy in Doomsday.
The big prepper guy.
Yeah, to me, he's like an ice guy. Like we haven't double checked, but he's definitely with ICE now. But he's a former police officer, and you just, but even then, he reminded me of people I knew back in Sydney and Cape Breton, and he's far right. Sure, I might be left, but we warmed to each other. But in the beginning, he wanted nothing to do with me, and he was very alpha male about it. Telling me to my face, like he wasn't with his guns. So it was a little nerve-wracking. But in the end, he gives me this sort of hug, this sort of manly or unmanly hug at the very last scene. And I could see that, he had warmed. We had warmed to each other. But what's nerve-wracking about him was not so much his extreme right beliefs, is that extreme right beliefs with weapons is never a good combination. And that's what America is about now, unfortunately.
Yeah, absolutely. Is it too sort of noble to say that you view this series as a bit of an antidote to what is arguably our greatest societal challenge, which is just that nobody is listening to each other? I know that's a stereotype, and I know that you're dealing with extremes here, but why make why?
Yeah, I'll take it. That is at the heart of it, is that we're not listening anymore. And, well, we are listening in our bubble. There's plenty of people to listen to that are like-minded, that exist online. And we made this because, one, I'm interested in all of these different edges. And maybe it's because I'm most comfortable on the edge myself, that I like being with these people. But also, I think if we just pause to listen for a little bit, we may find someone's why, and that may change how you view things. And I think if we do more of that in the society we live in now, in this sort of polarized, know-it-all society that we live in now, we would all be better off. And that's the point of the series.
Absolutely. Todd Sampson, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.